Video number 2. Hey, I figure I'm on a roll today. Why not do a second video? I might even do a third. Okay, I guess this second video will be about when I began to wake up and how that happened. So I have been a Jehovah's Witness since 2008. I began studying in 2007. I've been fully indoctrinated since 2007, and I have some blood relatives in the organization my entire life. So I pretty much believed it was the truth even prior to getting the truth or getting baptized in 2008. But I was always kind of afraid of it. Like it's always had an influence over me because of my family and their behaviors. So it's a pervasive, now in hindsight I see how pervasive it can be even for non-members, and I see even my non-witness family, it affects them. So it's a very pervasive organization even if you're not a member. But prior to that, I believed that Jehovah's name was Jehovah's name because that's what my family had told me. So I always kind of feared Jehovah. My grandmother told me at an early age that Armageddon was coming, and she terrified me as early as I could remember. I'd been taken to assemblies where I remember hearing message that was kind of scary, but I just didn't know about the religion until later in life when some witnesses came to my door, and then a coworker asked me to study the Bible. So I did. So I began studying in 2007. Readily accepted it because it was familiar to me. I had family who were witnesses. I had a child out of wedlock. I'm sitting here trying to think, what made me do it? I mean, I feel like I studied it well. I feel like I did my homework. But really in hindsight, I feel like I had a child out of wedlock at that time. It was a bad time in my life. I lived alone. Witnesses were calling on me and I was letting them in. I was reading watchtowers and stuff. I was fine with it. I just knew I wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't even know how you became one. Didn't know you studied and all that. Didn't even know while I was studying that I was studying, while I was studying, that was to become a Jehovah's Witness. That dawned on me about halfway through the Bible Teach book. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this. Okay. But anyway, so I was studying during 2007. I really feel like it was a way to, I loved righteousness. I was curious about the Bible. I wanted to learn. I was also studying the Quran, and I was also studying with Mormons at the time. I mean, I had a spiritual need. There's no doubt about that. But I do feel like maybe I was trying to, in hindsight, redeem myself to my family because I had disappointed them. I wasn't married. I'd had a child. I was kind of wild. So, maybe getting right with God somehow redeemed me. But I went like all in. I did it, and I dropped everything, and I lived this life to the letter. I pioneered whenever I could. I love Jehovah. If any of my friends see this video, they'll tell you I was a Jehovah lover. So, and I'm sure that when my name was announced, there were some people probably falling out and crying. It was not expected. No one saw it coming, and I didn't tell anyone. So I feel really bad about that because I have a lot of really good friends, but I wish they knew, I just wish they knew. But hopefully one day they'll be able to see this video and see what really happened. So I did over the years, any questions that I had, I was very forthcoming and asking my questions. I remember going to an elder's house one time. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with it. I just showed up at his house and was like, yeah, I'd like to know how they come up with the information for the magazines. I was just curious about that. Can you explain that to me? And even he was a little taken back by that, and he goes, well, Candace, I have to ask myself all the time, is this the truth? And I was like, wow, even the strong ones are not so strong maybe. And he said, but then I have to reassure myself, this is what I've done all my life, and this is good, and this is good, and this is good, so it has to be the truth. Exactly how they get it is not so important as how much it has benefited us, and we can see how much it has benefited us. But his explanation was pretty vague. He said that they get information from people around the world. At that time, I don't think they were doing that. He said that they get information from the governing body and people at Bethel, and then they all compile it together, and then they get together and do all these publications, and that's really not at all how any of the information is written. Not, the governing body doesn't even write this material that they're given credit for, so, and they don't really even consider it. So it's not like they read all this before they it goes to print. So anyway, he didn't give me a very clear answer, but I thought, I took it. I had other questions about 1914. I was very into reading the Daniel book, very into reading Isaiah's prophecy. I stayed in those books. Those books are so studied and highlighted. Oh, the Revelation book, the first night I got it, I read the entire book the first night. But I remember studying the Revelation book not long after I got baptized, and I was sitting in the Kingdom Hall in the book study thinking, they really think that this is a trumpet blast? Surely they're going to fix this. And then so they came out, and I heard it was going to be Rise, and I'm like, whew, they're going to fix that, because that was crazy to think that convention in Ohio was a trumpet blast. And then they didn't fix that part. I was like, oh, wow, it's still... Revelation book was like, that's a bunch of that stuff was, questionable. But I thought, well, I still was, they could tell you to be humble and say Jehovah will fix it eventually. And I was like, okay, Jehovah will fix it eventually. Who am I to say? One way or another. The book is kind of crazy, but I guess it's more right than my understanding of Revelation. So who am I to say one way or another? So just along the way, there were things that didn't match up. Couldn't get answers for. Now I realize, I don't have to have the answers for everything. But by God, Watchtower, if you don't have the answer, just say you don't have the answer. Watchtower will make something up if they don't have the answer. They want to put it in this box and put a bow on it. And there's your answer. So if they just stop making stuff up, maybe I believe them. But anyway, they'll make up an answer. So, so over the years, I've just had some questions about things. Well, it was shortly after I got baptized, I read my Bible constantly, and thankfully I read from like 3 or 4 different translations, and my Bible teacher really didn't like that idea that much, but I wouldn't put it down. I liked comparing them against other translations, and I kept it, like, to this day. I still have my King James. I still have a bunch of different translations that I look in. So my J.B. Phillips is one of my favorite. But so I still compare them all against each other and then look online at Bible Gateway and all that. So I was doing that all along, and really not so much keeping up with the publications as much as I was reading my Bible, looking up Greek and Hebrew. And I've always done that. I've always been a big personal studier. I would study the Watchtower. I would, do my lessons or whatever. Sometimes I didn't. We all slipped on that. There was so much homework to do. But for the most part, I was just a student of the Bible. I love studying the Bible. So in 2008, late 2008, I was realizing the things that I was reading about Jesus and how... he says you'll have no life in you if you don't eat this bread and drink this wine. And I was like, wow, they're not teaching us these things at the Kingdom Hall. So it's really bothering my conscience. All these things that I'm reading about Jesus, learning about Jesus in my Bible reading. So I go from 2008 to 2011, and all these things about Jesus are just burning in my heart. Holy Spirit, I feel like, is just speaking to me, and I'm not getting Holy Spirit out of the publications, but I'm going to the meeting. I'm trying to do everything that would be the definition of spiritual, but they're really not giving any credit or glory to Jesus. And I'm seeing this year after year. They're putting him secondary. And it just didn't dawn on me that was, I knew it wasn't making sense in my mind, but it never dawned on me that they weren't right. Because I believe I was fully indoctrinated. This was the truth, They had it right. So I've got to do what they say about Jesus. So in 2011, I began partaking, eating the bread, drinking the wine, and I was very private about it. I'd only discuss it with a handful of people if they asked me. And if they asked me, I would tell them I don't have any special insight. Don't feel like I'm going to heaven. Don't feel like I know what heaven is like. I just know that what this says, Jesus says that all of you do this or you have no life in you. And that, from the very beginning, I knew that the 144,000 was symbolic. And I was thinking, well, they're going to fix that any day now. I would pray about all of these things that I'm seeing. I'm like praying about it and waiting. And they are just sticking to their guns more than ever about these doctrines. And so I didn't have any reservations about eating the bread or drinking the wine because I knew that the 144,000 number was symbolic. It was, Revelation was, the kingdom was symbolic of a perfect cube, and those measurements and those numbers were symbolic of God's kingdom, so they weren't literal. And someone else brought out in another video, Son of Thunder, he says, the 144,000, look, first I heard the number of the 144,000, and then I saw the number, and it was a great crowd. So the great crowd that they have separated out from this elite 144,000, same group of people, just a big number. Just a big symbolic number. So, Watchtower has that wrong, and they're too proud to correct it. So a lot of people are misled, but they want to keep that, there's only one reason why they would do that. They want to keep that elite status. Only a handful, are getting this benefit or have this relationship with Jesus, and no one else does. So I'm probably going to have to make another video about my meeting with the elders because this is getting too long. But anyway, so it came down to it. I had missed a couple meetings in March. I had a brother he was married, and he was sending me texts. I was in no way, shape, form, or fashion. He can comment on here if he wants. If he ever sees this, he'll tell you. I was never trying to be involved with him. I never said one thing ever out of line with him. I was friends with his family and his wife. But I feel like he began trying to have a little bit more contact with me than what was probably allowed. And so I told the elders, I said, hey, he's like texting me a lot, and I'm kind of not comfortable, with that. So that was the only time. I've never been involved in any controversy, anything like that at the hall. So this was the first time that I'd ever really gotten elders involved in anything. Kind of felt bad for telling the guy I'm not handle my own problems or whatever. And I told him and his wife, hey, I don't want to, I'm uncomfortable with that. So, but anyway, he was texting me so much. I went ahead and told the elders, hey, he's texting me in the morning, at night, some things that he shouldn't probably be texting me. So they said, okay, we'll handle it. So I missed a couple meetings just because I kind of didn't want to face the guy after that. And while I missed those meetings, I was really doing some deep thinking, and I was thinking, why, if I'm reading these publications, am I filled with so much guilt, and I've never gotten Holy Spirit out of reading these publications? I was really doing some inward reflecting while I was doing personal study, while I had these this time off from the meeting. So I wasn't not being spiritual. I was using this time away from the meeting to study more than ever. And so I was really just asking myself, why? Where is this guilt coming from? Why, if I'm not committing any gross sin, why, if I've lived this life to the letter and I'm doing everything I can spiritually to take care of my family and do these things, why am I under this crushing heap of guilt all the time? I can't escape it. And then I feel like I've been, my reasoning has been taken away from me, or my power to make decisions. Why do I feel like my mind is not right anymore? How can this be? Why do I feel weak about these things? And I just could not put my finger on it. And I looked back and I was like, well, really, these publications aren't saying anything harmful. I couldn't find anything harmful in the publication. So I'm reasoning like, Jehovah hasn't ever done anything wrong to me. And I'm thinking of all the benefits, friends and fun and family and all these good things. But then I just couldn't figure out why I had this guilt. And so a little bit of background, and sorry family, I'm about to kind of put your business out there, but my family that's in the organization, strange dynamic, this brotherly love it is, and I'm finding out it's not exclusive to my family. There is an intense hatred between my family members who are in the organization, and it's because of this cycle of guilt, fear, this judgment. So you're a witness, you have a license to judge. So here's this person judging this person, making them fearful, and it's this cycle of fear and guilt and judgment, fear and guilt and judgment. And they're judging each other. And this week I'm not calling you, and next week you won't call me, and the week after that we're calling the elders because we're just going to get to the bottom of this, and then the next week I'm not calling you. And then so I've seen this go on for years, and I'm like, where is this even coming from? But if the organization wasn't in the picture at all, nobody would be making anybody feel guilty for anything. One's accusing the other. Well, you could go to the meeting if you wanted to. Well, you're going camping this weekend. You should be at the meeting. You shouldn't have bought that boat. You bought an RV. You're going to get destroyed at Armageddon. And it's just fear, guilt of all these things that the organization is telling us to judge people based on. It's ridiculous. So I see others having this intense hate because we're constantly judging others. And when you're in a constant state of judging others, you got your own rafter in your eye. So anyway, I've seen that happen in my family. I forgot where I was at. Anyway, so I've observed this behavior in my family, and all of these things together, I started to wake up. I started to think, okay, these nagging questions, these nagging things that I've had about doctrine, I've got to ask these questions. So like a good girl, here's where it got interesting. Like a good girl, I'm watching my broadcast every month, and I'm like, I need to get spiritually stronger. So I turn on and I'm watching the broadcast, and Brother Let is like, you got to get closer to Jesus. You got to dig in and look for Jesus. And so I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm doing what Brother Let says, and I'm going to get closer to Jesus. So I start digging in, doing what Brother Let says, and I'm like, wow, they are not teaching anything about Jesus, like Jesus. They're making you afraid of Jehovah all the time. Draw close to Jehovah, not draw close to Jesus. It's all about Jehovah, and not Jesus. So Then I got to looking at, somehow in my personal study, took me down the rabbit hole of 607. I would never dream of looking at apostate literature at that point. So I started studying 607. I had gone to the library. I'd gone to a bunch of places, you know, just in my own personal studies and in our publications. Well, then I'm finding, like, hold on a second. This is what put up the first red flag. I'm like, hold on. I cannot find this 607 mess anywhere. It is not. Okay, calm down, Candace, because 607 BCE is not recognized anywhere else as this being the date that they based this siege in Babylon. So I'm looking, I can't find it. So I was like panicking almost. I looked everywhere and that was it. That first date was it. I watch, so I'm at that point, I'm like, okay, it's bubbling up. I'm going to have to ask the elders this, and I know they'll be suspicious of me and I might get in trouble. Never saw myself out of the organization, ever. Then I'm watching the broadcast again, and Brother Let says, those accusations of child abuse are apostate lies. And I'm like, what accusations of child abuse? I haven't heard about this. So I go look at the accusations of child abuse. And I don't just go anywhere. I go to the Australian Royal Commission and I watch, I want to go to the source. I watched the governing body sit on the stand and I watched them lie. That was it. I sat and I watched them question them, and I watched them lie. Here are some men that I've been to Bethel. I've been in their conference room. I have had lunch at Bethel with Brother Led. I have sat next to the man at the table and his wife. I've been in his office. These are people, Brother Hurd, these are people that I've been around. And I'm watching them lie. And I saw him and I heard him. And I was like, it just started crumbling for me. Like, this is it. I'm going to have to say something. So I prayed. And it was like, everything was just jumping out at me. Everything was just red flag. And oh my gosh, I cried and I sobbed and all of that. And finally I got the courage to meet with the elders, and in my next video I will go into that meeting. I tried to record it and people kept texting me and it cut off my recording, so I only got like maybe 5 minutes of it, and it was hard to hear and you couldn't hear any of it. So there was a bunch of small talk, when you first get there, hey, did you guys hit traffic, blah blah blah, none of that. So anyway, my recording cut off and I'm sad about that. But so anyway, that's how I woke up. I was definitely accused in my meeting of looking at apostate literature. Sister, what have you been looking at? And I'm like, my Bible. I've been reading my Bible. Been watching my broadcasts and reading my Bible. Doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. They're like, no. And I was like, yeah, I have. And they're like, no, you haven't. And I was like, yes, I have. And they said, who have you been hanging out with? What have, you've been watching apostate literature? I said, never. I would never look at apostate literature. And at that point, I would never, at that point, I'm still like fully, I would say not fully indoctrinated, because I was beginning to wake up, like seeing the governing body lie so blatantly and then seeing that 607 wasn't real. Those are really the only two questions that I had for them in 1914 in my meeting with them, which it wasn't a judicial meeting. It wasn't any kind of meeting except for to check on me. That was it. And they couldn't answer my questions. And then they just ate me alive in that meeting. So I'll do another video, just start to finish what happened in that meeting and how I am disassociated now. So anyway, thanks for listening. Look forward to the next video.